Well, hey, good morning, Catalina Foothills Church. It's Pastor John Stone here, and I wanted to begin our Tuesday morning devotion by introducing you to our Candy Monster. Candy Monster is located here in our entryway to our church, in our foyer, and we're asking you to buy bags of candy, pre-wrapped candy, and come feed the Candy Monster so that we'll have enough candy for our trunk or treat folks who are going to visit with us in our parking lot on October 31st. As you may or may not know, we're offering an alternative to traditional trick-or-treating since many neighborhoods will not be open. Many folks will not be wanting people to come to their home because of the coronavirus. We're going to have a safe trunk-or-treat out here where kids can trick-or-treat around spaced cars. We want to make sure we have enough candy, and you may not be able to come or participate, but you can bring candy and feed it to the Candy Monster, and we'll use that to give to our kids. So drop by our church anytime. It doesn't have to be this Sunday, and we'll make sure that your candy that you drop off at the front desk, or you can come in here and drop it off yourself, is used for kids. We've been in Acts chapter 10. Thanks for that public service announcement. And in Acts 10 and 11, we have the story of Peter learning that he is a racist and that he can no longer be a racist. And the way Peter had become a racist is that the Jews, in interpreting their own law, not in reading God's actual law, had built up a tremendous distinction between being a Jew and being a Gentile. And in their mind, there were only two types of people, Jews and Gentiles. And this division, this difference they had created, had become racist. They looked down on Gentiles. They thanked God in their prayers that they were not Gentiles. And they had declared Gentiles unclean, so much so that a good Jewish person would never would consider it horrifying to go and be around Gentiles. And they created a whole world where they never dealt with Gentiles. And now the gospel has come in Acts by the Holy Spirit, and God is destroying that division. And I'm going to let you read in chapter 10, verses 9 through 22, where Peter is given a vision. Peter is hungry. He's staying in a man's house. He goes up on the roof. He falls asleep while he's hungry, and he sees heaven open, and he sees a sheet come down. And in the sheet, it says that there were all kinds of four-footed animals, as well as reptiles and birds. And a voice said, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." And Peter replied, "Surely not, Lord. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean." And we know from our study in Leviticus that these are the animals that were forbidden of the Jewish people to eat, that if they ate them, they were unclean. And this vision happened 3 times in a row. And right when the vision was opened, this Gentile that we read about in verse 1 of chapter 10, Cornelius, a Roman and a Gentile, showed up and said, "I want Peter to come to my house and preach the gospel to me." And now Peter realizes that his dream is showing that Gentiles, in fact, are not unclean, and that the ideas he's had about the Gentiles have been racist in nature. And so he goes to Cornelius' house. He preaches the gospel to them. Even before he can almost get the gospel out, they receive the Holy Spirit, not only Cornelius, but his entire family. And they're born again, and many in their town are born again. Well, the Jews back in Jerusalem hear this, and they call Peter to explain his actions. And you can see that as chapter 10 ends and chapter 11 begins, but he says this. He gives us more detail, and you see that in verse 8 and 9. I replied, "Surely not, Lord. Nothing impure or unclean has ever entered my mouth." That's chapter 11. That's the same thing we saw in chapter 10. The voice from heaven said, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." And in that moment, he realized that the Gentiles had made clean. Wherever the gospel goes, wherever it goes, it destroys racism. Why? Because we're all sinners. Being educated, being uneducated, being rich, being poor, having white-colored skin, having brown-colored skin. None of these distinctions hold up in the presence of the gospel, because we recognize that God makes all men clean. And that we are called to go with the gospel, to go in the Great Commission out. And wherever we go, we destroy racism through the gospel. Because the gospel says everyone's a sinner, right? Everyone needs to stand in that line at the temple and offer the sacrifices for sin. It doesn't matter that we look different. It doesn't matter that we're from different cultures. It doesn't matter that we're raised different. All men stand before the gracious, loving, holy God guilty. And in that moment, none of the distinctions that we often use to make ourselves feel better, or to put others down, or to criticize others, or to make ourselves feel better, they all fail in the presence of our sinfulness against a holy, loving God. So my challenge for you today is to read Acts 10 and 11. We'll do another devotional on it next week. And to recognize that racism, wherever it is, and from whomever it's given, one way, the other way, sometimes racism comes both ways between groups, is sinful. And God hates it, and the gospel destroys it. And I want to challenge you to think about the ways in your heart that you think in racist ways. You think of yourself as better than other people. You think of other people as inferior to you. You think of their lifestyle as inferior. Instead of thinking of yourself and them as sinners in need of a gracious, loving God. Thanks for hanging out with me this morning in our long devotion. And would you remember my candy monster that's been here for the devotion? Love you and miss you. Look forward to being with you Sunday, either live stream or in person. Have a great week.